So I'm going to start with the first question. How long do services typically remain available for youth transitioning out of foster care in Massachusetts? And what steps can they take if they initially decline services but later wish to re-engage?
Sure. So when youth do turn 18, they're able to remain in services. And actually, we're trying to make a bigger push, for youth to automatically opt in. That's our hope. We don't want anyone to leave at 18 because I don't know about you, but I know at 18, I was not ready to pay my own bills, to afford rent and groceries and car insurance and phone bills and all the rest of it. Like I wasn't ready. I was ill prepared for dealing with the world. And we realized that no one at 18 is not a magic number. You're not automatically, given the wisdom to handle and the experience to handle everything. So we want to encourage you to stay with us at 18. Typically, they can stay with us until 22. And then they're with the approval of an area director for the office they're working with, they get extension up to 23 if they're finishing a degree or program. So whether that's a college or vocational program, or perhaps if there's other things we're trying to accomplish in the meantime, some goals, we'll get an extension until we can get that done. But typically the age does go up to 22. And some youth at 18, they decide that they need a break from DCF. They're not sure what they want to do. They just need a break. In a way, we became the de facto parents in a way. So we were the person that they were fighting against as they were going through the normal, I say, developmentally appropriate steps of kind of challenging authority and the rest of that. I mean, we become the parents, so they fight us. They kind of want some separation. I get that. But they can come and they can come back into services and sign back in up to age 21. When they turn 22, it's too late, but right up to 21, they can sign back in. And we still do have some services that are available, as far as like assistance for college or vocational school that go beyond that. But that's kind of the general landscape as far as like services and be able to sign back in.
Awesome. Thank you. So my next question is, what support does DCF provide for former foster youth and DCF sponsored guardianship or adoption?
So there's a difference. So for a youth that is placed in a guardianship or adoption, the adoptive parent or the guardian can always extend that they're getting a subsidy. They can extend that subsidy up to 22 if they're going to school. Or if you have a youth that has severe developmental needs, that can be extended as well. I mean, but for the most part, it can be extended until 22. Sometimes the youth can be made their own repayee for that subsidy as well. If for some reason like new needs arise, let's say like medical needs, et cetera, they can always look to revise that subsidy and increase it as well. But that subsidy can continue, and the Mass Health does continue until age 26. So that coverage for all youth, whether it's adoption guardianship or they're with us through foster care or they leave at 18, whatever it is, that Mass Health stays active until 26. And at 26, then they have to go out and either apply for Mass Health on their own or secure their own insurance. But for youth that are placed in adoption or guardianship through DCF, we do have a tuition and fee waiver, which will cover the tuition fees at any Massachusetts state public college university, except for there are some what they call courses that are not state supported that were not included in the legislative bill, like UMass Medical School is not included. There are also some schools like courses like summer courses, winter like intersession courses. Some of the online courses or evening weekend courses were not included or in what they consider state supported, or were not part of the original provision for the tuition fee waiver. So those ones aren't funded. But for the most part, for most, for all the UMass schools, Bridgewater State, Framingham State University, Salem State University, et cetera, Pittsburgh State, it'll cover the tuition and fees, which is a huge help. Every semester. I mean, that's a huge cut out of the bill, which is fantastic. If a youth is in foster care for at least a year before the adoption or guardianship, they can also qualify for the William Warren Scholarship, and that will help support any unmet need. So it's not a check for $1,000 or $2,000. We're not able to do that, but it's for any unmet need covering the cost of attendance, whether it's housing, meal plans at school, tuition room and board, or even the summer courses. Those things we can't cover the tuition fee waiver. We can help with the William Warren grant, and you can get that every year. If you can apply every year, and if it is a competitive scholarship, there are limited awards, but if you get it once, that does not prevent you from getting it again and again. And that ends at age 25. So it goes right up through age 24, ends when someone turns 25. If you turn 25, and this is for the tuition fee waiver as well, and the foster child grant, if you turn 25 during the course of the academic year, those same benefits you started with at the day one of the academic year stay in effect until the end of the academic year. So it doesn't expire and go away halfway through your semester or halfway through that school year. So those are to remain in effect. So we're able to make those awards. If a youth is adopted or placed into guardianship after reaching age 16, the federal government provides ETV funds, which we're able to distribute to provide additional funding for youth that are attending a vocational school or college. So we're able to provide that assistance as well. So that can be an additional, it's up to $5,000 a year to help pay for room and board. A small part of that can be used for books and transportation needs. But that's something we're able to provide. But there is that limitation that was put on there where you have to reach age 16. So it was to try to help, what was considered like the harder to place youth, older youth, for adoption and guardianship. So they added as an extra incentive by making that accessible.
And then the next question I have is, does DCF provide mental health resources and support for youth transitioning to adulthood, or are there other agencies they partner with that do?
So this is one where there's a lot to it. So as far as transitioning to adulthood, so DCF does offer the support that we have, like our services, like we have adults and outreach workers.
Yep.
So youth that are either in foster care or kinship care, or perhaps if they've at 18, they sign back in, and whether they're receiving payments themselves that they're using to pay rent or rent a room from someone, or if they're attending college, living on campus, and living independently, we're able to assign the outreach worker for them. And the outreach worker can help as far as life skills training, which is like the PIA curriculum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yep.
Then also they can help with applying for college, visiting college campuses, completing the financial aid package, providing support, visiting every week while they're in college, and helping them with, whether it's trying to figure out, problems or issues with school, or making referrals for services. But they are there to kind of work with them. So Adults and Outreach Services, are there to partner with youth that are placed in group homes or are contracted foster care with agencies like Mass Mentor or Devereaux. It's part of their contract to provide those services to help support life skills and engagement, to help support youth as far as transition to college, applying for college. And then we also work with Mass EDCO, which is funded through TRIO. It's a grant-funded program. I don't know if you're familiar with them. But Mass EDCO is available to not just foster youth, but anyone in the community, adults, people who've never even heard of DCF. They can help with college applications, choosing schools, support around taking some of the tests, whether it's the LSAT or the GRE for grad school. They have a scholarship database as well, but they can help with college applications, financial aid applications. They can even help later on once you finish school. If you want to work on loan forgiveness, they're able to help with that, and they have locations all across Massachusetts. And we also partner with Mass, the Network for Foster Care Alumni, Mass NFCA. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah, I just saw that recently.
Yeah. So we are one of three agencies that support them. So we provide some of their funding, but they also we try to work with them. They provide a lot of supports, information, resources, post DCF services. So I'm trying to differentiate when I say post DCF, like beyond 18 and forward, but you can also get post DCF as also like beyond 23. Like once that extension ends, like what are we able to do? And so, aside for some of the funding that can go up until age 25 or 26 for ETV funds, there's not a lot that we do have available. Even the limited housing assistance that we do have, like there are some expiration dates for some of that as well, which we'll talk about when we get to that question. We try to provide as much assistance as we can. We do have adolescent outreach workers that have stayed connected with their youth who are in their late 20s and 30s that have just developed a great relationship. And that's been kind of like their support network, because they didn't have really much of a network to begin with. And they developed a really good relationship with the outreach workers. So, that's part of the supports. And of course, the ongoing worker can also continue with them up until the case closes, which could be 22 or 23. Awesome. And we also try to make referrals and connections to like adult services if someone needs, they might qualify for DMH services, DDS services. They try to help connect them with that. We have specialists that try to help as far as with getting those applications processed to kind of negotiate with some of the agencies. We also work with Mass Rehab too to get youth connected that might benefit from those services. And we try to help support youth, but that may qualify for Social Security with applying for that benefit as well.
Can you provide an overview of the career guidance and life skills training programs available?
We are also trying to do more as far as getting youth access and making better relationships and connections to some of the providers, because there are a lot of like work to, learn to earn programs that are out there that are, that are helping youth like get skills around the biotech. I mean, is a big one too. Like you have Bioversity. There's a lot of agencies that try to connect youth and get job training skills, workforce development, like Youth Build. More Than Words. I mean, there are a lot of agencies that we're trying to connect with and develop better working partnerships to get the information to the youth, because not everyone wants to go right to college.
Yep.
Maybe college isn't everyone's goal, and so if they want to do like hands-on and get some of that that work skill growth and development, and be able to get jobs where they can actually afford to live in the areas they want to live. I mean, there are some partnerships available that we've been working on with these agencies that are available that are typically grant funded.
I think one of the biggest ones I wanted to ask was, are there any resources available for those who want to attend college but don't want to attend a public or community college in Massachusetts? So like out of state or private?
So the tuition fee waiver, that part is only for in-state. Mm-hmm. The foster child grants, and the foster child grant is available for youth that are coming to care to DCF under protective means. So it's a care and protection petition through juvenile court because of abuse and neglect. Sometimes not all probate court orders are considered protective. Some are just, care, and others are like, care responsibility. So there are some protective probate court orders that also qualify. If they stay with us till 18, then we receive grants called the foster child grants. And so that can provide up to $6,000 a year, $3,000 per semester that can go towards whether it's state school, whether it's private school, or vocational programming as well. So of course, there's some of our youth, like they want to pursue, like there's Lincoln Tech, there's Rob Roy, Empire Beauty, like there's some other guys, the tractor trailer driving schools that all these programs that do take FAFSA. So they have to be FAFSA eligible. And those programs that I just named and there are many others as well, but the vocational programs and their technical schools, and we are able to provide those funds for them, whether it's in-state, out-of-state, whether it's a private school or college, that those funds also apply. ETV funds can also be used in-state, out-of-state, private, vocational, college, that doesn't matter. And same with the William Warren Scholarship. It's only the tuition fee waiver that is just for Massachusetts state schools, because that was part of the funding and how when they put that into action, that's what we're able to provide.
Just what recommendations would you have for former foster care youth or current foster care youth trying to find more scholarships and financial aid?
Well, I mean, the first thing I think is definitely I want them to make sure that they are checking with if they have a social worker or outreach worker or former social worker. But even if they don't know, if you actually go to mass.gov and you go to the DCF website and you search on the DCF page, you search adolescent services, there'll be a tab that says, educational support. And you click on that, and that has our tuition fee waiver, the foster child grant, ETV, and our scholarship as well. And we're working with our IT to add some additional scholarship resources. But Mass EdCo does have a scholarship database that is anyone can access. It's completely free. I definitely advocate, for people to engage with Mass EdCo. There are sites across the state, or they can also work with people virtually. I mean, that's one of the great things that COVID gave us, was the ability to work without having to be in person midlife. Harder and easier in some ways, depending on how you look at it. Yeah. But they do have a great database of scholarships. And of course, I always tell youth, like, don't look away from the scholarships that are just $500 or $1,000, because, if you go in just for the big ones, then you miss the small ones, and you could pay for your entire, the entire year with small scholarships when you add them together. But I mean, so we try to encourage youth to also go there as well. But we will be posting, we'll be adding some additional resources to our state site that are not part of DCF or the state, but just other resources for scholarships that we want to share. And also, if you go to the state website for FAFSA, they actually have a link to another scholarship database as well. But it does take a lot of digging. It takes some persistence.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of
And I
search.
know that some of the high schools will also have access and will also assist with scholarship searches.
What resources are available to help adolescents and young adults with disabilities transition into adulthood successfully?
Mm-hmm. So we do have specialists with DCF, and we have psychiatrists, we have doctors, we have nurses that we have contracted. They're on staff. They work for us, just for us, and they provide consultation on cases. They can help us, and we also have mental health specialists. And so they can help us to make referrals, to access services. Sometimes they'll help advocate with hospitals or with health insurance companies in trying to get services, whether that's inpatient, outpatient, in-home services supports, nursing support. So we're able to try to get that. We do have relationships and advocates that help us kind of navigate things with DMH, with DDS. They help us as far as accessing benefits, services, and with that transition to adulthood for those youth when they do turn 23 and they move from DDS or DMH to DCF case management. And our social workers can also help apply for Social Security if someone does qualify for that because of a disability. We have special education coordinators, and they work. So we have them within the area office, and we also have regional coordinators as well. And so they help advocating with the school, making sure that we've had current testing, relevant testing, that we're addressing special needs, that we're advocating for the services in the school setting that's appropriate. We also have regional coordinators that are starting a new initiative of trying to work with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to look at those high-risk youth for not graduating and try to help figure out how can we better service those youth as well, so we have everyone to graduate. Beyond high school, I know from my piece, like a lot of my jobs focus around education. I always advocate for, and we want our youth to bring a copy of their IEP, and when they leave, by policy, if they have an IEP, they should have a copy of that when they turn 18, or at least when they leave services, whichever way it goes, because they can bring that to the school and ask for accommodations. And the schools aren't required to give accommodations like the high schools are, but many colleges will if they have the documentation, whether it's additional test time, separate place to take the test with fewer distractions, assistance with note taking, et cetera. So there are some accommodations that can be made, and we can work with the schools to get that.
And then the next one was about the housing support programs that you touched on a little bit. Are there housing support programs or resources available specifically for current and former foster care youth who either do not have the option to live on campus or just choose not to?
So I'll start with the easy one. So any youth that is with us till 18, at any point, when they leave care, whether it's 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, we do have discharge funds. I know it's not a lot of money, but it's up to $2,500 to help pay for first-class security. It could be setting up an apartment, getting the furniture they need, moving expenses, et cetera. We are able to help out and give something. I know it's I wish we could give more, but trying to distribute it, the funding we have and try to meet all the different needs. And hopefully someday we get more, because we want to continue to increase our housing support, because that's not even enough. That's not even first-class security in an apartment. But we also do have limited housing vouchers. I know we have our FYI vouchers. And for those vouchers, we have our housing specialist. She's working with the different towns and cities to try to access, because we have to, in order to use some of those federal funds, we have to get a partnership with each town and each city to provide housing. And so when some of the towns and cities aren't responding, or they're slow in the process of completing it, or maybe we want them to add more and they won't. So we're trying to expand that so we can make sure we're using all those funds to provide as much as we can. But even with those, it's still a drop in the bucket for what our need is. So there are some limited funds that do require that youth are working. For housing, there's one voucher. It's for youth who have a closed case. So if they, anytime from 16 on, they leave foster care. I think that one expires at 21. And it's only good, I think, for 36 months, but there are some limitations. One goes up to age 25, but there's a sunset date for all of those. And then we also have one which is it's a subsidy which helps pay for rent while someone's in school or working, but then eventually it slowly increases over time, I think maybe 15%. And so they're responsible for paying all of it and it ends. So there are some supports, but those are limited. We have wait lists for them because we don't have enough. And that's one thing. I mean, we've been trying to, kind of scrounge across the resources in Massachusetts and other agencies and, finding out like what they have available, but we also hear about their wait list. So, we want to know what's there because if we can get someone on a wait list everywhere, we want to do that. But we also know there's some limitations. And for the youth that do qualify for DMH, they have access to other housing. So if they do qualify for DMH services, we want to make sure they get qualified because it does open up some additional housing supports as well. I'm just trying to think for youth that are with us beyond 18, if they want to rent a room from a friend, an aunt, an uncle, their neighbor, or maybe, someone they don't know, but they're just renting in the community, they're able to get young adult support payments. And while they're in college, they can also get young adult support payments, which are given some funds. And I think it's maybe a little bit over $1,000 a month, which they can use to help pay for rent, or pay for their needs. I know, in today's economy, it's still not a lot. But sometimes, there's an aunt that'll rent your room for $500. Like that's fantastic, or $800. And you have some money for groceries and you can still apply for like SNAP benefits and some food stamp assistance. Like sometimes it's piecing the different systems together to try to provide the support. And so we always try to do that, trying to offer as much as we can. We're trying to, I guess in some ways we are kind of like that, that parent with many children where we're trying to make every dollar stretch. So sometimes it's relying upon other agencies, trying to develop those partnerships, trying to find out all the resources we can to try to provide as much support. And, I know the state, I'm happy is actually finally focused more on adolescent housing, that we're realizing our young adults that have gone through the foster care system need more support. I see, a lot of people, in their 20s, they may move out at some point, but, I feel that there are a lot of adults, before they hit 30, they can move back home at least once. And that, and if we can have that additional support, even short term, we need more housing, we need more supports to be able to provide, for our youth, because sometimes, you're not living on your own successfully forever the first time. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get it right, or you've had a bad, run in with a roommate or what have you, or life happens, or I don't know, pandemic hits and, employment stuff. But the state's finally focused on that. I'm hoping that we can get more programs and more funding to really provide the housing that we need for our youth, and not just DCF youth, but I think everyone in their 20s. I think it's a hard time, and we need more housing support. I always advocate that when one of our youth turns 18, do the CHAMPS application. That's a common housing application for Massachusetts public assistance, and complete that at 18 because we know it takes years to get Section 8, and down the road, if your chance comes up, if you don't need it, great, no harm, no foul. But if you do need it, then there is that option. And so I think 18, that should just be automatic. I wish that we could just automatically enroll all of our youth that are with us till 18 into the housing system, but because they're adults, they have to do that themselves. And we can't enroll them before they're 18 when we have the legal authority because they're minors. So it's a difficult piece.
I just want to ask a follow-up question to that. You were talking about like how if they just decide to work, they still receive assistance. Do you have to work like a full-time job, or can it be like part-time?
So at 18, if they say like, or they say they or 18 or they leave and come back in, doesn't matter. If they say like, I want to work, and you have to work an average of 80 hours a month is kind of the requirement. And we realize sometimes if there are circumstances getting in the way of that happening, if someone's mental health is getting in the way, that's fine. Your case can still stay open as long as you're addressing your mental health and we're working to address that barrier. If someone has a substance use issue, if you are engaged in treatment and you're working to address that issue, we're not going to ask that you're working, so many hours a week. Like, we want you to focus on that. Like, let's work on the barrier. What's getting in the way of you being successful. And so some youth, 18, they're like, I don't want to go to college. I don't know what I want to do for training, but I want to work and kind of practice like living on my own or doing what I can. And so they can stay with us. And so it averages out to about 80 hours a month. So if you do 30 hours one week and 10 hours the next week, I mean, you're averaging out, you average out maybe 20 hours a week is one way to think about it. So they can work part-time. If they're going to school part-time and maybe taking 2 classes instead of being full-time, and they're working, 6 hours, that's fine. I mean, a combination, if they're working on a high set program, because a high set program isn't full-time. So if they go into a high set program and they're doing, some whatever hours, for me, when I was an adolescent supervisor, it didn't matter if they work in, one day a week and they're doing the high set program. I was happy, like we're making some progress. We're learning a lot of skills. We're working towards their high set certificate. So there are opportunities if someone does want to just stay with us, they want to pursue job training. Let's say someone does, so they do one of the vocational on the job training programs, and they get a job and they're doing well, they can still have their case open until 22. So even if they go and they get they get the plumber certification, living well, but they still want some support, and because they're not quite ready, they can keep the case open until 22. So there are options to continue that support until 22, or let's say they start a program to become a plumber or to become a hairdresser or to get an associate's degree or finish the bachelor's and they need a little more time. That's when we can talk about waivers to keep things open until 23 to give them some support to finish that. So we try to provide some transitional support, and not everyone has to go to college, not everyone has to go to a vocational program, or like I said, if there's barriers, or let's say, if they lose employment, then they're actively working to seek new employment. Okay, good. We're not going to close your case. Like you're working. This happens. Unfortunately, there are disruptions in employment, and that's part of life, and we understand that.
The last question, I know you were also kind of talking about this, but it was what support or resources are available for foster care youth after completing their bachelor's degree, such as housing and additional financial aid for furthering education.
Well, unfortunately, all the financial aid that we have, it ends after you earn a bachelor's degree. So like even the tuition fee waiver, if you earn a bachelor's degree, let's say you graduate at 23 or 24, you can't use that tuition fee waiver to get a second bachelor's or do another program. It ends once you get the first one. So there is no aid for that. Usually by the time someone has graduated as well from college, they're usually 23, 24, 25. So they're at 24, 25, like we can't access the discharge funds, or they've already accessed the discharge funds typically by then, if their case closed, they've accessed the discharge funds, and finishing out their degree. Like I said, that college aid is still there until 26, but beyond that, we don't have, that's one of our limitations. We do help funding for the Mass NFCA, so that is one way of trying to connect our alumni, the youth that have experienced the foster care system, and providing some support, some resources. They also offer assistance with financial literacy. They have some kind of community building programs to try to get youth involved. But that's what we have right now. And I know one thing that I would also love to see down the road is if we can get some of our successes to come back and be peer mentors to help other youth that are in college. That's a program that I would like to see us start. And we've been kind of talking about trying to figure out how that might work, because I think there is a need for people like yourself who've been successful to pass along that experience to someone else who has maybe, they're not living with their parents and they've had a different situation, but to not feel so alone and to have that additional support and work through things. But unfortunately, but the overall, I guess the direct services that we have that are just from DCF directly, unfortunately, we don't have much in that sense. And so we do rely upon like Mass NFCA to provide some of the services. One thing that you talk about as far as things that DCF does do to try to help as far as like skill development and so on. We just had our college and career fair yesterday. So we invited all the state public schools, colleges. We had a few private schools, vocational schools, trade schools. We even had like an ambulance company. We had the Coast Guard was there. Just trying to get high school age youth, whether they're freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, recent grads in a high set program, perhaps in college, want to transfer, a chance to meet with the mission staff and see like what is out there, and to start thinking about that. So that's one thing we do to try to like encourage that mindset of focusing on the future and providing information as far as like DCF resources to help support that. As I was telling one youth there, don't worry about the financing. Let's figure out what you want to do. Let's figure out what school you want to go to, and then let's figure out the rest.
Yeah,
But there is support, there is assistance, and I always want to encourage our youth, like, take advantage of what the state has to offer. Let us help. I get, not want to deal with DCF, but when someone turns 18, your relationship with DCF changes.
exactly. Yeah.
You don't need if you want to go to Florida for a weekend for a spring break, you could do that. You don't need DCF approval for that. You just let us know where you're going. Let us know
Yeah.
where you're going to stay, because kind of like a parent, like, we want to make sure you're going to be safe.
Yeah.
Or if we hear like a plane crash, we don't like, was that, that wasn't your plane. Like, like
Yeah, exactly.
very way, kind of like a worried parent. Like, we want to know. But you don't need our permission to go and do things. When we give our young adult support payments to youth, and they use that money to rent a room, it doesn't have to be a place that we approve of. Like, maybe you're living with an aunt or uncle who may have, maybe it's not a house that we can approve because of space or because of other issues, or it's a neighbor, or maybe you're renting a really small room that wouldn't meet like foster care standards for space.
Yeah.
You're fine with it, and then it's not up to us to approve. We'll give you the payments. You use them as you see fit to take care of that, or stay in a foster care placement or a program or whatever, or live on campus. Like, that's, DCF doesn't have that same, heavy-handed approach, because when youth are under 18, we are ultimately responsible for everything.
Yeah.
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 Even if someone's out in the community doing something, that still comes back on DCF. Like, did you know? What do you do? What should you have done? So the relationship changes when you when you turn 18, and we want to partner with you and we want to help you to be successful. What I love about adolescent work is really kind of like, feeding that desire for someone to grow and encouraging their independence. And I guess it's one thing. I've been with DCF for 26 years.
Yeah.
And I haven't burned out yet. And I
That's
don't
good.
anticipate it. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's possible. But I love the work that I do, because it's all about, I did adoption work for 11 years. And, this is the other part of permanency, if you will, like, trying to help someone find their way, find their path, giving them access to options, and trying to help them to access the options, trying to, and help them to access resources. So this is kind of my passion. So it's what keeps me going.